What's up guys, Freezy here. Blue Archive Global is about to launch and I've been enjoying the game a lot on the JP server. So I planned a couple of videos to help you navigate through the somewhat confusing early game. This video is going to be a guide on who to reroll for and some tips on which students to focus for a smooth early game. I'll also include a quick evaluation of all the 3-star students on launch for the second half of the video. There's a lot to go through, so let's start with the reroll tier list first. So here is my tier list on who to reroll for. It is highly recommended to start with either Hibiki or Iori, and ideally both if you have the time. If you get Hibiki or Iori in the starting pool, you're pretty much good to go. Haruna is actually on the same power level as the first two, but she is easily farmable from hard mode, so if you are free to play, Haruna's priority is a bit lower. Though I have to say, it is not at all necessary to start with all the top tier units. I don't think global server will be that competitive, and all the top tier units only really matter if you want to be like super hardcore. A lot of the other good units are not released yet, so just starting with 1 or 2 good units is totally fine. You'll most likely get the other good units later from the other banners. So when do we stop pulling gacha in the early game? The answer is it depends. With the average luck, you can get a playable roster within 100 pulls, and I definitely wouldn't do more than 200 on the first banner. The most important student to get is Tsurugi, as the game is pretty much unplayable without her. All the early game content can be cleared with Tsurugi plus 3 other appropriate DPS. So after getting a good starting roster, the next step is to save her gems for future banners. Global is on accelerated schedule, and the rate up in this game is absolutely awful. If you want a specific character, most likely you will need 24k gems for the full spark. And remember, do not pull gacha if you don't have enough for the spark. Next, I compiled a list of good early game damage dealers for each color. The ones marked with stars are extraordinary for early game maps. But even if you don't have all the good early game units, it's really not that big of a deal. Having good early game units just means you can clear the story a few days earlier, and that will give you the earlier upgrades on the cafe, which generates more stamina over time. It is not really that big of a deal, but do try to finish the main story as soon as possible. The extra stamina per hour does add up over time. Now let's quickly go over the early game team setup. Your team should ideally consist of 1 tank, 1 healer, and 3 damage dealers of the appropriate type. The last member is whatever, can be another damage dealer or support depending on who you have. For a 6-student team, 4 different EX skills are needed for each cycle, so we just want to use the skill of the 3 damage dealers plus the healer to cycle, and occasionally use the tank skill to defend against strong enemy attacks. I'll get into more combat mechanics in the next video, but for now let's just have a basic idea on team building, and that should be more than enough to clear the early game. Lastly, I have listed some important tanks and healers which are essential for the early game. The best tank is Tsurugi, and she is far more tanky than any other students in the game. The best healer in the game is the 1-star nurse Serena. Everyone should have her after a few pulls. After chapter 6, we need 2 teams, so we need another tank and healer. If you pulled one of the 3-star tank, use that, or just use Yuka as the free-to-play option. The second best healer is ideally Hanae, as she also sees a lot of play in late game raids, so she's worth investing. Shinatsu is also a good alternative for the second healer. Before we get into the 3-star student evaluations, I want to quickly go over the late game contents for Blue Archive. What you're seeing right now is the most recent boss raid in JP server, and raids are the primary gem income in this game. We should start getting raids sometime after the first month of launch, so we got time to prepare. Raids generally requires multiple teams, and the bosses have different phases. So raising the correct students for each raid is very important, as resources are very limited in this game. Looking at the raid reward, we can easily see that the raid is what everybody should focus on. Assuming Nexon keeps everything the same, we should get about 3 raids per month, and that is a lot of gems. As long as you invest into the right students, getting tier 2 reward is super easy. If you pull for the correct students, even as free to play, getting top tier reward is easily doable. So the main difference of having top tier student or not is basically 200 gems per raid. There's also the PvP arena, where you fight other players for daily ranking rewards. The PvP in Blue Archive is pretty bad, to be honest. Nobody likes it due to how random it is. Consistently get top place in PvP requires a heavy amount of investing, and the reward is just not worth it. The arena had gone through a huge update in JP server, and I'm not sure which version of arena we will get on global, but regardless, I do not recommend free-to-play or low spender focusing on PvP. The reward for PvP is honestly not that significant, and to stay at top consistently, a lot of resources are needed for some PvP specific students. We have very little resource in the early game, and over-investing into PvP focused students will fuck up your raid progression, so keep that in mind when you check the student evaluation section. Finally, we have the student evaluations. I'll give some quick reviews on all the Freestar students on launch so you know what they do. There's a lot of them, so I won't be reading them. Timestamps are available, so use those to check the students you got. Thanks for watching and good luck rerolling.